Are we ready?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to show you today how to set your C-clock up. So hopefully you'll manage to get it out of the packing case, and it should look something like this. The tissue here is to stop the escape wheel from spinning, and this plastic bar between the pendulum rods, and if you notice there's a rubber band under here, just holds the pendulums together for shipping. So the first thing we're going to do is to take off the tissue. So it's just sellotape together. You can cut it off or just tease it off. So we'll just take that off and just carefully pull that out. And then we're going to take the rubber band off the pendulums. So we'll just take that off, and now the pendulums are free to swing. The clock's actually not wound up and shouldn't be wound up, but there's just enough. There's a little bit of power on there. It should actually go. Don't lose your little stick. You might need it later on in life. And then it's simply a case of winding it up. So you have a key which is normally mounted at the back here. That's where it goes when it's not in use. So we take the key, the winding square's here, pop it on and start to wind. Now if you can be bothered counting, it's just under 8 full turns, I think. No, sorry, just under 16 full turns. But you can wind up here, and if you look carefully, down here, there's a little steel pawl, and when you finish, when it's fully wound, that little pawl is going to catch on to a hook. So it's coming through now, and I can see the chain's now just caught on the hook, and it won't wind any further. You can't overwind this clock. So that's fully wound. I meant to actually show you when you're moving the clock about how you should carry it. Depending on what model you have, we've got a moon phase C clock here. You basically just hold at the top, and you can then move it around. They're quite robust, well made, not going to damage it. So there we have the C clock. It's ticking away. To set the pendulums going, you just give it a light swing. Don't overswing it, else it'll start and bang against the dial pillars here. So if we pop the key back here, then all we have to do is set the time, and you just do that by simply rotating the minute hand. You can actually move it backwards, but not too far. Let's have a look. Not too far. So you wind it forwards until you get the correct time. Now, at around about the 12 o'clock mark, there's a little pawl in here and a pin in this wheel here, which you might notice, and that lifts the little pawl up and it indexes the moon phase dial. So if you look around about 12 o'clock, and as you heard from that clock that was chiming in the background, it's about 12 o'clock, just after, and it'll start to index the moon phase dial. So that's the clock set to time, wound up, fully wound up, and then all we have to do is put the glass shade back on. I'll put this one on. This is not the correct shade for it, but it gives you some idea. And I would do that when you've moved this into position. You don't really want to be carrying this about with the shade in place. Once you've wound it up and you've got the clock going, just leave it for let it run for a week and make a note of the timekeeping. It may need a slight regulation. To regulate the clock, it will only be a few minutes a week. But to regulate the clock, at the back here we have a pear-shaped bob, and on the top of it there's a little lock nut, and if you look very carefully on the top of the lock nut there's a little dot. So what we do is we hold the lock nut and we basically undo the little pear-shaped bob. You can then move the lock nut, making note of where the little dot is, however many turns you need to correct the time. And the important thing to remember is that the regulation is the opposite to a normal clock. So if you lengthen this pendulum, or this little back bob here, it will actually speed the clock up, not slow it down like a normal clock. And one revolution of the little lock nut is approximately 1.5 minutes a day. So you can work out after a week approximately how much to turn the little nailed nut, and then over a period of a couple of weeks you should get the piece keeping a reasonable, well, pretty good time. Approximately about 2 minutes a week I would expect you should be able to get. And the other rule is whatever you do to the right, do to the left. So it's one full turn of each little pear-shaped bob gives you 1.5 minutes a day. So when you set the time going again, the only other thing that might need adjusting is the moon phase dial. Now I mentioned it earlier that the dial index is around the 12 o'clock position. So to index, if you try to move the moon phase dial now, you can't actually, you can move it a little bit, but it won't, you can't index it a lot. So the best thing to do is to move the hands away from 12 o'clock, so I'll move it to 6, 6:30, whatever. And it's simply a case of rotating the dial, the moon phase dial. And if you notice very carefully when you're doing this, the dials are hand painted, and on the moons the artist, Keith Warrington, he numbers them, puts his initials on, and also the date. So this was painted on the 12th of the 12th of the 12th. And it's number 152. Wow. So you just set the moon to the phase, and if you're not sure what the phase is, just wait while the evening and look out of the window. And then move the hands back to the correct time. Which is about 5 past. Okay. We'll put the glass shade back on. So now you don't need to take the glass shade off to wind. You can wind it through the hole here, and we have a little tool which looks we have a little tool which looks something, thank you my beautiful Hayley. This is the wrong glass shade for it. But this little tool here, you put through the hole here, and it just locates on the minute hand, and you can move the hand backwards and forwards just that few minutes that you may know to do each week. And that sits on the back here on this little holder. Oops. It's the wrong one, methinks. There. And that's how you set the seat lock.